I sat across from Brenda, from HR, and Frank, my department head, as they slid photos across the table of me meeting with competitors. My heart raced, but I kept my face neutral. 6 months of secret documentation, midnight work sessions, and careful planning had led to this moment. "This is your last day, Kara," Brenda said coldly. I didn't argue. I simply smiled and replied, "You caught me." What they didn't know was that those competitors were patent lawyers, documenting how PharmaTech had stolen my groundbreaking medical delivery system design. 3 years earlier, I had joined PharmaTech with so much hope and enthusiasm. Fresh out of my biomedical engineering PhD program at Stanford, I was eager to make a difference in the world. PharmaTech wasn't as flashy as some of the Silicon Valley startups, but they had a solid reputation in pharmaceutical delivery systems, and they promised me freedom to pursue my research interests. "We believe in nurturing talent," Frank Taylor, the company president, had told me during my interview. "Our best innovations come from giving brilliant minds like yours the space to create." Those words had sealed the deal for me. I turned down offers with higher salaries because PharmaTech seemed like the place where I could truly make an impact. My supervisor, Heather Dawson, reinforced that impression. She was smart, supportive, and seemed genuinely invested in my success. "The sky's the limit for you here, Kara," she told me during my first performance review. "I haven't seen this kind of innovative thinking in years." For the first 2 years, everything was perfect. I worked on various projects, building my reputation and waiting for the right moment to pitch my big idea. I had been developing concepts for a new drug delivery system since graduate school, one that could revolutionize treatment for patients with chronic conditions by combining precise dosage control with real-time monitoring. When I finally pitched my idea to Heather, she immediately recognized its potential. "This could change everything for patients with diabetes, heart conditions, or chronic pain," she said, eyes wide as she reviewed my preliminary designs. "Let me take this to Frank. We need to get you resources." Within a week, I had a dedicated budget, access to the advanced materials lab, and a small team of technicians. For the next 6 months, I worked tirelessly, refining the design, running simulations, and building prototypes. The system worked better than I had dared to hope. Initial tests showed 98% accuracy in dosage delivery and real-time monitoring capabilities that could integrate with any smartphone. Heather was ecstatic. "Frank wants monthly updates on this personally," she told me. "He rarely takes such direct interest in development projects." At first, I was flattered by the attention. Frank began stopping by the lab, asking detailed questions about the mechanisms and materials. He seemed particularly interested in my background research and design process. "Document everything meticulously," he advised. "This could be a patent goldmine." I noticed the first red flag about 4 months into development. Frank brought his nephew Aaron to one of our meetings. "Aaron has some background in medical devices," Frank explained vaguely. "I thought he could offer a fresh perspective." Aaron Taylor had a business degree and, from what I could gather, minimal technical knowledge. Yet suddenly he was attending all my presentations, asking for copies of my research notes, and getting granted access to our secure development server. "Is this normal?" I asked Heather after a meeting where Aaron had dominated the conversation, despite contributing nothing of substance. "Frank thinks very highly of Aaron," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Just try to work with him. He'll be evaluating the commercial potential of your system." A week later, I found my lab access had been restricted. I could no longer enter during evenings or weekends without special authorization. Then I noticed research files going missing from the server, only to reappear days later with slight modifications to the creation dates. The real shock came when Jessica, a colleague from the testing department and one of the few friends I'd made at PharmaTech, pulled me aside after lunch. "Be careful, Kara," she whispered. "Something similar happened to Doug in cardiovascular last year. His project suddenly became company property. He got sidelined and eventually fired for performance issues." I dismissed her concerns initially. My name was all over the project documentation. I had witnessed the required invention disclosure forms. There was no way they could just take my work. Then came the quarterly shareholder meeting. I wasn't invited but watched via the company live stream that was available to all employees. I nearly dropped my coffee mug when Frank took the stage and announced, "Today, I'm thrilled to reveal a revolutionary new technology developed by our rising star, Aaron Taylor." The screen behind him showed my exact design with minor cosmetic changes. Every core component, every innovation I had created, was there but with Aaron's name attached as the inventor. This proprietary drug delivery system will position PharmaTech at the forefront of personalized medicine, Frank continued proudly. Aaron has been working on this concept for nearly 3 years, and his breakthrough will change countless lives. 3 years? Aaron had only been with the company for 5 months. I felt physically ill as I watched him take the podium, confidently discussing technical details he had merely memorized from my presentations. The live stream chat filled with congratulatory messages from employees. I saw Heather's username among them. "Congratulations, Aaron. Phenomenal work." My hands shook as I closed my laptop. The betrayal was complete and apparently well planned. They had been setting this up for months, using me to refine and perfect a design they never intended to credit me for. Now I understood why Frank had been so interested in my documentation process. He needed to know exactly what to replicate and claim as Aaron's work. That night, I hardly slept. By morning, my shock had transformed into cold determination. If PharmaTech thought they could steal my work and discard me, they were about to learn how thoroughly they had underestimated me. I arrived early and immediately began downloading copies of every file related to my project. Most of my access was still intact. They hadn't moved to push me out yet. I suspected they would need me to continue refining the system while training Aaron on the technical details he clearly didn't understand. I meticulously copied email threads, meeting notes, and early drafts of the design with my comments and revisions clearly marked. I found the original invention disclosure forms I had submitted, now mysteriously missing from the official repository. During lunch, I searched the company directory for employees who had left suddenly in the past year. 3 names stood out, all engineers with promising projects who had departed without announcement. One of them was Doug, the person Jessica had mentioned. After work, I drove straight to the public library and used their computer to search for these former employees. I found Doug Parker, now Will Parker, according to his LinkedIn profile, working at a small medical device company across town. I sent him a carefully worded message asking to connect about previous experiences at PharmaTech. To my surprise, he responded within hours, suggesting we meet at a coffee shop the following evening. The message contained a strange postscript. "Cash only. Leave your phone in your car." Will was younger than I expected, probably early 30s, with nervous eyes that scanned the coffee shop continuously. He ordered nothing and spoke in a near whisper. "They'll have made you sign an NDA and IP assignment agreement when you started," he said. "It's standard, but written to be extremely broad." "They did," I confirmed. "What they're doing is legally questionable but difficult to fight. They targeted my transdermal patch system the same way." Suddenly, the VP's brother-in-law was the genius behind it all. His bitter smile didn't reach his eyes. "They offered me a settlement when I threatened to fight, not huge, but enough to keep me quiet while I looked for another job." "I don't want a settlement," I said firmly. "I want credit for my work." Will glanced around again, then slid a business card across the table. "Sarah Madison, patent attorney, who specializes in IP theft cases. She helped me negotiate my settlement. She's expensive, but she knows her stuff." I met with Sarah the next day during my lunch break. She was a sharp-featured woman in her 40s with the most piercing gaze I'd ever encountered. "This happens more than you'd think," she said after hearing my story. "Companies prey on young innovators who don't understand how to protect themselves. The good news is that if you've been documenting your work process from the beginning, we may have a case." "I have original concept sketches from graduate school," I told her. "Plus emails discussing the idea before I even joined PharmaTech." Sarah's eyes lit up. "That's excellent. We'll need to move carefully, though. Has the company filed patent paperwork yet?" "I don't know. I'll have my team check the database." In the meantime, document everything. Every conversation, every email, every time your access is changed. Use personal devices and accounts, nothing company issued. I returned to work with a renewed sense of purpose. I created a secure email account solely for communicating with Sarah and began keeping detailed notes of everything happening at PharmaTech. It didn't take long to discover that the company had already filed preliminary patent paperwork. Sarah's assistant found the application with Aaron Taylor listed as the sole inventor, filed just 3 days after the shareholder meeting. The description matched my system exactly. This actually helps us, Sarah explained during our next meeting. They've created a paper trail we can challenge. We'll file a patent interference claim when the time is right. Over the next few weeks, I continued gathering evidence while maintaining a facade of normalcy at work. Jessica became my eyes and ears in departments where I didn't have access. She discovered internal emails discussing Aaron's breakthrough and secretly copied them for me. They're fast-tracking the FDA submission, she told me one day in a hushed voice as we stood in the parking garage. Frank wants approval before the end of the year. That evening, I met Sarah and her expanded legal team at a small restaurant across town. As they discussed strategy, I noticed a movement outside the window. Someone was photographing us from a car parked across the street. Don't react, Sarah said calmly, having noticed my sudden tension. But it seems your company is taking an interest in your after-hours activities. They're following me? The realization sent a chill down my spine. Corporate espionage accusations are a common tactic when companies get nervous about intellectual property disputes, one of the other attorneys explained. They're building a case against you while we build ours against them. Sarah placed her hand over mine. This actually means we're on the right track. They wouldn't waste resources monitoring you if they weren't worried. As I drove home that night, I constantly checked my rearview mirror, spotting the same sedan several car lengths behind me, all the way to my apartment complex. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. The message was clear. We know what you're doing, but they didn't know everything. They didn't know about Will Parker or that I had already secured an attorney. Most importantly, they didn't know that every suspicious action they took was strengthening my case against them. That night, I received an email from Sarah. The patent interference claim was ready. We would file it at exactly the right moment when PharmaTech least expected it and when it would cause maximum disruption to their plans. The next morning, Frank summoned me to his office. I steeled myself for confrontation, but instead found him unusually friendly. Kara, I've been thinking about your contributions to the company, he began with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You've been such a team player, and we want to recognize that. He offered me a modest raise and a vague promotion to senior technical consultant that came with no actual change in responsibilities. It was clearly a bribe to keep me cooperative. That's very generous, I replied, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. I'm just happy to be part of such innovative work. Speaking of which, Frank continued, Aaron could use your expertise on some technical refinements to the delivery system. You two will be working closely together from now on. And just like that, Aaron became my supervisor. The man who had stolen my invention was now directing my work. Each day became an exercise in restraint as he took credit for my ideas in meetings, made uninformed decisions that required my later correction, and treated me with the condescending air of a superior guiding a promising but junior colleague. You've got real potential, Kara, he told me during our first one-on-one meeting. Stick with me, and you'll go far. I smiled and thanked him, while mentally adding his comments to my growing documentation. My double life was taking its toll. By day, I played the role of the supportive team member, helping refine my stolen invention. By night, I worked with Sarah's team, building our case and preparing for legal action. The stress was immense. I lost weight, developed insomnia, and jumped at unexpected noises. Frank's sudden interest in my social life added another layer of complexity. He began inviting me to company events, introducing me to board members, even suggesting weekend hiking trips with the innovation team. It was clear he was monitoring my conversations and connections. Keep him close, Sarah advised when I told her. He's trying to gauge how much you know and what you might do about it. I found my work assignments gradually shifting away from the delivery system. Aaron explained it as broadening my experience, but the intent was obvious. They were limiting my access to my own invention. Then came the announcement that shook the entire company. PharmaTech had secured a major partnership with Medicor, one of the largest medical supply distributors in the country. They would begin production and distribution of the drug delivery system, now branded as TaylorDose, as soon as FDA approval came through. The email announcement included a photo of Frank and Aaron shaking hands with Medicor's CEO. Aaron was identified as the inventor of this revolutionary technology. I printed a copy and added it to my evidence file. That evening, I returned home to find subtle signs that someone had been in my apartment books slightly out of alignment. My laptop moved an inch from its usual position. I hadn't kept any sensitive documents there, knowing this might happen. Everything important was stored in a secure cloud account Sarah had set up. The next day, my personal email was flooded with spam, thousands of messages clogging my inbox. When I ran a security check on my home computer, I discovered it had been compromised. They were growing desperate, trying to find what evidence I might have collected. "They're getting nervous," Sarah said during our next meeting. "The Medicor deal raises the stakes considerably. If they get FDA approval before we act, the financial implications become much more complex." I was beginning to wonder how much longer I could maintain the charade when Heather, my original supervisor, who had been avoiding me for weeks, suddenly pulled me into a supply closet after a departmental meeting. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, her eyes red-rimmed and face pale. "What they're doing to you is wrong." She pressed a USB drive into my hand. "Frank threatened my job if I didn't support Aaron's claim. I have a mortgage and a son in college. I couldn't risk it. But I've been documenting everything. This has all the original files, timestamps showing your work predates anything Aaron claimed, plus internal memos about how they plan to appropriate your design." I stared at her in shock. "Why are you giving me this now?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "They're doing it again. There's a new engineer in cardiovascular with a promising stent design. I heard Frank discussing the same strategy with Aaron yesterday, how to replicate it and claim it as internal development. I can't be part of this system anymore." I hugged her quickly. "This could change everything, Heather." "Be careful," she warned. "They're watching you much more closely than you realize." That night, I drove 2 hours to meet Sarah at a hotel conference room in a neighboring city, taking elaborate precautions to ensure I wasn't followed. When she reviewed the contents of Heather's USB drive, her professional composure cracked into a genuine smile. "This is exactly what we needed," she said. "Proof of premeditation and corporate conspiracy. With this, we can file not just the patent interference claim, but potentially pursue punitive damages as well." For the first time since the shareholder meeting, I felt real hope. The tables were turning. PharmaTech had stolen my invention, but they had no idea what was coming their way. 3 days later, I received an urgent meeting request from Brenda in HR. The subject line simply read, "Important personnel matter, immediate attention required." The meeting was scheduled for 10:30 that morning in the executive conference room. I texted Sarah immediately. "It's happening." Her response came seconds later. "Remember the strategy. Stay calm. Don't admit or deny anything specific. We're ready." I spent the next hour backing up final files and clearing personal items from my desk as discreetly as possible. By the time I walked into the conference room, I had already accepted what was coming. Brenda sat on one side of the table with a folder in front of her. Frank stood by the window, arms crossed. There was an empty chair for me facing them both. "Please sit down, Kara," Brenda said in her most official HR voice. I complied, keeping my expression neutral. Frank spoke first. "We've always valued loyalty at PharmaTech. It's one of our core principles. Which makes what we've discovered particularly disappointing," Brenda continued, opening the folder and spreading photographs across the table. They were surveillance photos of my meetings with Sarah and her team, taken with a telephoto lens. Some showed us reviewing documents. Others captured us in serious conversation. One particularly clear shot showed Sarah handing me what appeared to be legal paperwork. "We know you've been meeting with competitors," Frank said, his voice hard. "Industrial espionage is not only grounds for termination, but potentially criminal. These individuals work for Henderson Medical," Brenda added, naming one of PharmaTech's main competitors. "Our security team has identified at least 6 meetings in the past month alone." I looked at the photos without touching them, then raised my eyes to meet Frank's gaze directly. I could see the satisfaction there. He thought he had caught me in wrongdoing that would discredit any claims I might make about my invention. "Do you deny meeting with these people?" Brenda prompted when I remained silent. "No. Do you deny sharing proprietary company information with them?" I chose my words carefully. "I've never shared anything I didn't have the right to share." Frank's face reddened. "This is serious, Kara. We have evidence of corporate espionage. This is your last day at PharmaTech. You'll be escorted to collect your belongings and then off the premises. Company devices will be confiscated, and we'll be conducting a full security review of all systems you've accessed." I could have argued, could have revealed that those competitors were actually patent attorneys, but the element of surprise was our greatest advantage. Let them believe they had caught me in wrongdoing. It would make their shock all the greater when they discovered the truth. "You caught me," I said with a slight smile. My simple admission seemed to throw them both off balance. They had clearly expected denial, pleading, or anger, anything but calm acceptance. "Security will escort you to your desk," Brenda said, recovering quickly. "You'll have 15 minutes to collect personal belongings, which will be searched before you leave." The walk through the open office was deliberately public. A security guard on each side of me, colleagues staring as I passed. I kept my head high, making eye contact with those brave enough to look at me directly. Jessica gave me an almost imperceptible nod as I passed her desk. At my workstation, they watched as I collected photos, a coffee mug, and a few other personal items. My computer had already been locked, and a technician was hovering nearby, waiting to begin the forensic examination of my digital footprint. Security searched my bag thoroughly before allowing me to leave. In the lobby, I was required to sign termination papers that included statements about confidentiality and non-disclosure that would come back to haunt PharmaTech very soon. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with email notifications. Frank had wasted no time sending a company-wide message about my betrayal and corporate espionage. The message warned everyone not to communicate with me and to report any attempts I might make to contact current employees. I was barely out of the parking lot when industry contacts began distancing themselves. LinkedIn connections disappeared, text messages went unanswered, and an invitation to speak at a biomedical engineering conference was abruptly rescinded. The financial reality hit hard and fast. Without a salary, my savings would cover expenses for perhaps 3 months. The legal battle ahead could take much longer, and Sarah's services weren't cheap, even with the contingency arrangement we had negotiated. That evening, sitting in my apartment surrounded by case notes and evidence files, my phone rang with Jessica's number. "Are you okay?" she asked immediately. "Managing," I answered. "What's happening there?" "Total chaos. They've pulled me into a meeting to ask about any files I might have seen you access. And Kara," her voice dropped to a whisper, "they've asked me to modify your original research files. They want me to alter timestamps and remove your comments before the FDA review." My heart sank. "Are you going to do it?" "Of course not. I've already copied everything to a secure drive. I'll make it look like I'm cooperating, but I'm keeping the originals safe. This has gone beyond unfair to illegal, and I won't be part of it." "Be careful, Jessica. They fired me without hesitation. They'll do the same to you." "I know. I'm already looking for another job. But I'm not letting them get away with this." After we hung up, I called Sarah to update her on this new development. She was particularly interested in the file modification request. "That's explicit evidence of fraud," she said. "If Jessica can document the request and preserve the original files, it strengthens our case considerably." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Sarah said with satisfaction in her voice, "we file everything first thing tomorrow morning. By noon, PharmaTech will be served with a patent interference claim, a whistleblower protection filing, and a wrongful termination lawsuit. Frank Taylor's day is about to take a very unpleasant turn. True to her word, at 9 the next morning, Sarah's team filed our comprehensive legal package. At 11:47, PharmaTech was served with papers. By 12:30, their stock had already begun to drop as the news hit financial wires. I imagined Frank's face as he realized those competitors in the surveillance photos were actually patent attorneys documenting PharmaTech's theft of my intellectual property. The trap he thought he was setting for me had become the snare that would entangle him instead. The cease and desist letter from Sarah's firm arrived at PharmaTech 12 hours after my termination. It was just the opening salvo in what would become a multi-front legal battle that would consume the next 7 months of my life. PharmaTech's initial response was predictable: deny everything and counterattack. Their legal team sent threatening letters claiming I had violated confidentiality agreements, stolen company property, and engaged in corporate espionage. They demanded I cease all legal action and sign an agreement surrendering any claims to the delivery system. Standard intimidation tactics, Sarah explained during our strategy meeting. They're hoping you'll get scared and back down. I had no intention of backing down. The day after filing our claims, PharmaTech and Medicor held a press conference announcing their partnership and the impending production of Taylor Dose. Aaron stood proudly beside Frank, accepting congratulations for his groundbreaking innovation that would transform patient care worldwide. PharmaTech stock jumped 12% on the news. Financial analysts praised the company's innovative pipeline and growth potential, completely unaware of the legal storm brewing. 3 days later, our patent interference claim became public record. Business reporters began calling me for comment. Following Sarah's advice, I declined all interviews, but provided a simple written statement. I look forward to the patent review process and having the true origins of this technology recognized. The company reached out through intermediaries, offering a settlement $75,000 in exchange for dropping all claims and signing an extensive non-disclosure agreement. It was insultingly small given the potential value of my invention. This tells us they're worried, Sarah said when I showed her the offer. But they're still not taking you seriously enough. My financial situation was becoming precarious. Job hunting was nearly impossible with the cloud of litigation and PharmaTech's accusations hanging over me. Several promising interviews ended abruptly when my current dispute came up. Industry contacts who had initially expressed sympathy began avoiding me as the legal battle intensified. Then came an unexpected breakthrough. A reporter from MedTech Journal contacted me about doing a feature on the case. With Sarah's careful guidance, I agreed to a limited interview focusing on the broader issues of intellectual property in medical innovation rather than the specific details of my claims. The article, titled Innovation and Attribution, When Credit Gets Complicated, presented a balanced view but included key facts that cast doubt on PharmaTech's version of events. It mentioned my background in this specific area of research, predating my time at the company, and raised questions about Aaron Taylor's sudden emergence as an innovator without previous experience in the field. The story caught the attention of the medical device community. Other engineers and researchers began reaching out privately, sharing similar experiences with different companies. 3 former PharmaTech employees contacted me with information supporting my claims about the company's practices. PharmaTech responded by accelerating their FDA approval process, hoping to establish market presence before our legal challenges could interfere. They also intensified their PR campaign, positioning Aaron as a misunderstood genius whose breakthrough was being challenged by a disgruntled former employee. They're getting desperate, Sarah observed when PharmaTech increased their settlement offer to $200,000, but they still don't understand what we have. What we had was Heather's USB drive, a digital smoking gun containing internal communications that explicitly discussed appropriating my work and crediting it to Aaron. We had deliberately kept this evidence in reserve, waiting for the right strategic moment to reveal it. That moment came when PharmaTech filed a motion to dismiss our patent interference claim, asserting that Aaron had been developing the concept independently for years before I joined the company. They submitted backdated development notes as evidence. Sarah's response was devastating. We filed Heather's documents with the court, including an email from Frank to Aaron that plainly stated, "Kara's design is nearly perfect. We just need to document your involvement and establish you as the primary innovator before taking this to market." The impact was immediate. PharmaTech's stock dropped 20% in a single day. Medicor issued a statement expressing concern about the ongoing patent dispute and announced they were reviewing the partnership agreement. I received a package at my apartment that evening, a recorded conversation between Frank and Aaron, explicitly discussing how they had stolen my design and their plan to discredit me if I fought back. "I don't know who sent this," I told Sarah when I brought it to her office. She examined the package carefully. No return address, generic packaging. Could be anyone inside the company who's been watching this unfold. The important thing is whether it's authentic. Her technical team verified the recording hadn't been altered. The voices were unmistakably Frank and Aaron's, and the content was damning. "If she makes noise about the patent, we'll bury her with legal fees and destroy her reputation," Frank said on the recording. "No one will hire her once we're done." "What if she has documentation?" Aaron asked. "We control all the official records. It'll be her word against the company's." "Who do you think wins that fight?" The recording became our nuclear option held in reserve while we continued building pressure through conventional legal channels. PharmaTech's board of directors called an emergency meeting as the legal and public relations crisis deepened. Financial news outlets began questioning the company's governance and innovation practices. The FDA approval process slowed as reviewers took note of the patent dispute. Then came the threats. Late-night phone calls with no one speaking on the other end. A car following me too closely on the highway, forcing me onto the shoulder. Nothing overtly dangerous, but clearly intended to intimidate. "We should consider a restraining order," Sarah suggested after I reported the incidents. "Against whom? We can't prove who's behind it." "That's precisely the point. Filing for protection creates another public record of potential misconduct associated with PharmaTech." The company's desperation became even more evident when they attempted to paint me as unstable and vindictive in press statements. They leaked out of context emails and selective performance reviews, suggesting I was difficult to work with and had a history of claiming credit for team efforts. I might have been crushed by this smear campaign a few months earlier, but now I recognized it as the last desperate tactics of a company running out of options. The truth was firmly on my side, documented and increasingly public. The Patent Office issued a preliminary ruling questioning Aaron's inventor status and requesting additional documentation from both parties. The FDA paused their review of the delivery system pending resolution of the ownership dispute. Medicor formally suspended their partnership agreement until the legal issues were resolved. PharmaTech was running out of both time and money. Their legal fees were mounting, their stock price was plummeting, and their flagship product was stalled in regulatory limbo. "They'll make another offer soon," Sarah predicted. "A serious one this time." She was right. 3 days later, PharmaTech proposed a settlement that acknowledged me as the primary inventor, offered substantial financial compensation, and included a position on their scientific advisory board. "It's a good offer," Sarah admitted. "Better than most clients receive in similar situations." I shook my head. "This isn't just about me anymore. There's a pattern here that needs to be broken." We rejected the offer and pushed forward with our legal actions, now expanded to include fraud claims based on the evidence from Heather and Jessica. Speaking of Heather, she had become an increasingly important witness, documenting how the company had pressured her to support Aaron's false claims. She was scheduled to give her deposition the following week, testimony that would be devastating to PharmaTech's defense. The night before her deposition, I received a frantic call from Heather's husband. She had been in a car accident. Her brakes had failed on a steep hill, sending her car into a guardrail. She was in the hospital with a concussion and broken ribs. The timing seemed far too convenient to be coincidental. I rushed to the hospital, consumed by guilt. Had my pursuit of justice put Heather in danger? Was it worth continuing if others might get hurt? I was sitting in the hospital waiting room, seriously considering calling Sarah to discuss accepting PharmaTech's latest settlement offer when my phone rang with an unknown number. Kara, it's Heather. Her voice was weak, but determined. They're saying my brake line was cut. The police are investigating. I'm so sorry, I whispered. This has gone too far. I'm thinking about settling. Don't you dare. The force in her voice surprised me. I've been wearing a recording device for months, documenting everything. My husband has all the files. Frank and Aaron and half the executive team are on tape discussing how they stole your work and how they've done it to others. I was going to surprise everyone at the deposition. I was speechless. This isn't just about patents anymore, Heather continued. This is about fraud, about threatening people, about potentially criminal behavior. Promise me you won't back down now. In that moment, looking at what Heather had sacrificed, how could I possibly consider surrendering? I promise, I said. We'll see this through together. Heather's accident transformed our legal battle overnight. What had been a patent dispute and wrongful termination case became a potential criminal investigation. The police treated the brake line cutting as attempted homicide, and while they couldn't immediately prove who was responsible, the timing and circumstances pointed clearly toward PharmaTech. Sarah added her legal team's resources to the investigation, hiring private investigators who quickly discovered the surveillance company PharmaTech had been using to follow me. With pressure from law enforcement, the head of that company admitted they had also been monitoring Heather for the past month. The recordings Heather had collected were even more damaging than we had hoped. Over 6 months, she had documented dozens of conversations that not only proved my case, but revealed a pervasive culture of intellectual theft at PharmaTech. At least 7 other inventors had had their work appropriated by executives or their relatives. When excerpts from these recordings were filed with the court under seal, the impact was seismic. Medicor immediately terminated their partnership agreement with PharmaTech. Their stock fell so precipitously that trading was temporarily halted. Financial analysts who had been praising the company's innovation pipeline just weeks earlier now questioned whether any of their patents were legitimate. The board of directors called an emergency meeting that lasted 2 full days. Reports leaked of shouting matches and accusations as the magnitude of the legal and financial disaster became clear. Frank launched a desperate attempt to save himself by blaming others. He issued internal memos claiming Aaron had misled him about the origins of the delivery system design. He blamed the legal team for not properly vetting the patent applications. He even suggested I had somehow tricked the company by presenting work that wasn't entirely original. None of it worked. The evidence was too clear, and Frank's own voice on Heather's recordings left no doubt about his central role in the scheme. Aaron, seeing the collapse of his patron's power, tried to cut a deal, offering to testify against Frank in exchange for immunity from civil penalties. His lawyer approached Sarah with a proposal that would have him admit to the fraud while positioning himself as another victim of Frank's machinations. Not a chance, I said when Sarah presented the offer. He was a willing participant from the beginning. He stood on stages and accepted awards for my work. Meanwhile, I was still receiving threatening phone calls warning me to drop the case. The caller never spoke, but the message was clear from the timing and frequency of the calls. I changed my number twice, but they always found the new one within days. The FDA formally suspended their review of the delivery system, citing significant concerns about the documentation and development process. They requested a complete history of the invention, including all contributors and their specific roles. 3 more former employees came forward with similar experiences to mine. One had developed a pediatric monitoring system that was later claimed by a board member's daughter. Another had created a surgical tool that was attributed to a marketing executive with no engineering background. The third had designed a patient management software system that somehow became the work of Frank's college roommate. Sarah consolidated these claims into a class action lawsuit, expanding the scope of the case and increasing the potential damages significantly. PharmaTech's legal team, recognizing the deteriorating situation, approached with yet another settlement offer, this one acknowledging me as the sole inventor, providing substantial financial compensation, and including a public apology. They're still trying to contain this, Sarah observed. They don't want the full extent of their practices made public. I considered the offer carefully. The financial terms would secure my future and validate my work. The public acknowledgement would clear my professional reputation. It was more than I had initially hoped for when we began this fight. But I thought of Heather in her hospital bed, of Jessica risking her career to preserve evidence, of all the other inventors who had been silenced by settlements and NDAs. This wasn't just about me anymore. No deal, I told Sarah. We need to see this through completely. The patent office issued its ruling the following week, officially recognizing me as the sole inventor of the drug delivery system and invalidating PharmaTech's application. It was a major victory, but only one aspect of our multifaceted legal battle. As the evidence from Heather's recordings became known within the company, internal chaos erupted. Employees began downloading and preserving documents related to their own projects, fearing they might be the next victims of appropriation. Others started updating their resumes and contacting recruiters, anticipating the company's collapse. The day before Heather was scheduled to give her delayed deposition, now from her hospital room, the breaking point finally came. The board of directors announced the termination of Frank Taylor as president and CEO, effective immediately. Aaron was also removed from his position, along with the chief legal officer and 2 other executives implicated in Heather's recordings. A board representative issued a statement acknowledging serious concerns about intellectual property attribution practices and promising a comprehensive review of all patents and pending applications. They announced the hiring of an external ethics council to overhaul company policies. This public admission of wrongdoing sent PharmaTech stock into freefall. Shareholders filed their own lawsuits against the board for failure of oversight. Potential partners backed away from deals. Industry analysts began questioning whether the company could survive the legal and reputational damage. With Frank and Aaron removed, the new interim management reached out through Sarah to discuss a global settlement of all claims. They recognized that continuing to fight was only destroying what remained of the company. They're ready to acknowledge everything, Sarah told me after the initial meeting. Full credit as inventor, significant financial compensation, no restrictive NDAs, and something I've never seen before. They want your input on restructuring their innovation attribution policies. The terms were comprehensive. I would receive full patent rights and control over licensing of my delivery system. The financial settlement included both direct payment and a percentage of future revenues if the system ever reached market. Most importantly, PharmaTech would issue a public statement acknowledging the wrongful appropriation of my work and detailing the steps they were taking to ensure it never happened again. Is it enough? I asked Sarah, thinking of everything that had happened over the past 7 months. In legal terms, it's extraordinary, she replied. You could continue fighting, but at some point, the destruction stops serving anyone's interests. The people who wronged you have lost their positions and reputations. The company has admitted fault publicly. Your invention will be rightfully attributed to you. I thought about it for several days, consulting with Heather and Jessica before making my decision. Both urged me to accept the settlement. The goal was justice, not vengeance, Heather reminded me. You've won, Kara. Completely. Jessica agreed. The company might actually become something better now. There are good people there who deserve a chance to rebuild something ethical. With their support, I accepted the settlement. The agreement was finalized the following week, and for the first time in over a year, I slept through the night without waking in anxiety or anger. The morning after the settlement was finalized, I woke to my phone buzzing with notifications. The business and technology press were reporting on the resolution of what they now called one of the most significant intellectual property disputes in the medical device industry. The headlines told the story. PharmaTech acknowledges engineer as true inventor of revolutionary delivery system. Tech giant settles patent dispute, admits wrongdoing. Engineer Kara Mitchell vindicated in David versus Goliath legal battle. PharmaTech's stock had stabilized with the news that the legal uncertainty was resolved. Their new interim CEO, a respected industry veteran with a reputation for ethical leadership, issued a statement committing to a complete reimagining of how we recognize and reward innovation. I had mixed emotions reading through the coverage. There was satisfaction in the vindication, relief that the battle was over, but also a lingering sadness for what had been lost along the way, nearly 2 years of my career spent fighting instead of creating. Sarah called mid-morning. How does it feel to be on the winning side of front-page business news? Surreal, I admitted. I keep expecting to wake up and find myself still in that HR meeting being fired. Well, it's very real. And you should know Medicor called my office this morning. They want to discuss licensing your delivery system directly. That was unexpected. With PharmaTech in upheaval, Medicor had apparently decided to approach me directly rather than wait for the company to reorganize its development program. They're offering very favorable terms, Sarah continued. They want to move quickly to get the system to market, and they're willing to acknowledge you prominently as the inventor. The validation was sweet, but I had been thinking about a different path forward. I appreciate that, but I need to consider all my options. I have some ideas of my own. Those ideas had been forming gradually throughout the legal battle. Each time I encountered another inventor who had been marginalized or had their work appropriated, I had thought about how the system could be different, how companies could foster innovation while properly recognizing and rewarding the actual creators. I spent the next month meeting with other engineers, inventors, and business strategists, discussing concepts for a different kind of medical technology company. Heather, now recovered enough to work part-time, became an enthusiastic partner in these conversations. Jessica joined us after leaving PharmaTech, bringing valuable experience in testing and regulatory compliance. 3 other engineers who had reached out during my case expressed interest in being part of whatever we created. 6 weeks after the settlement, we incorporated Mitchell Medical Innovations. Our mission statement reflected everything we had learned through our experiences, advancing patient care through ethical innovation, where every contributor is recognized, respected, and rewarded. I used part of my settlement to secure office space and basic lab equipment. We developed clear policies for intellectual property attribution from day one, including a revolutionary profit-sharing system that would ensure inventors received ongoing benefits from successful products. Medicor, impressed with our approach and eager to access my delivery system technology, became our first major partner. They provided additional funding and manufacturing capacity in exchange for distribution rights, while explicitly acknowledging our team as the inventors of any technologies they licensed. Within 3 months, we had a functioning prototype of the next-generation delivery system. The new design incorporated improvements I had been envisioning since before the legal battle began. FDA submission would take time, but early testing results were even better than we had hoped. As word of our company's founding principles spread, we began receiving resumes from top engineers and researchers across the medical device industry. Many explicitly mentioned our ethical innovation model as their reason for wanting to join us. "We're going to need a bigger office," Heather observed as we reviewed applications one evening. "And a more comprehensive HR policy," Jessica added with a smile. "One that specifically prohibits stealing people's work." The irony wasn't lost on any of us that our company had been born from a profound injustice, yet was now positioned to become a model for the industry. Sometimes the most powerful changes emerge from the greatest challenges. PharmaTech, meanwhile, was undergoing its own transformation. The board had appointed a permanent CEO with a background in both engineering and ethics. They implemented new attribution policies that resembled the ones we had created for Mitchell Medical, and established an independent review board to evaluate innovation claims. Several former executives, including Frank and Aaron, faced civil lawsuits from shareholders and regulatory investigations into their conduct. The legal system would determine their ultimate fate, but their professional reputations were already irreparably damaged. About 6 months after founding Mitchell Medical, I received an invitation to speak at the National Medical Device Innovation Conference, the same event that had rescinded my invitation during the height of the legal battle. My proposed topic: ethical innovation, protecting creators while advancing patient care. Standing at the podium Looking out at hundreds of industry professionals, I felt the full weight of my journey. From the excitement of my initial breakthrough, through the betrayal and theft of my work, the grueling legal battle, to the creation of a company founded on the principles I believed in, it had been a profound transformation. The easy path is to become cynical after experiencing injustice, I told the audience. To believe that's simply how the world works, that power always wins over principle. But that's not the lesson I choose to take from my experience. I explained our company's approach to attribution and compensation, sharing specific policies and procedures that others could adapt. The response was overwhelming. Representatives from major medical technology firms requested follow-up meetings to discuss implementing similar systems. After the conference, a young engineer approached me, visibly nervous. "I'm in a situation at my company," she confided. "My manager is taking credit for my work on a diagnostic system. I don't know what to do." I recognized the fear and uncertainty in her eyes. The same emotions I had felt 2 years earlier when I first realized what was happening with my invention. "Document everything," I told her. "Secure evidence of your contributions. And know that you don't have to fight alone." I gave her my card and Sarah's contact information. The system only changes when we refuse to accept injustice as normal. As Mitchell Medical continued to grow, we established a support network for whistleblowers and inventors facing intellectual property disputes. We offered resources, legal referrals, and sometimes simply the reassurance that others had faced similar challenges and prevailed. The greatest satisfaction came a year later, when our delivery system received FDA approval. The first production units included a small plaque reading, invented by Kara Mitchell and the team at Mitchell Medical Innovations. Seeing my name properly attributed to my creation after such a long struggle brought tears to my eyes. During the official launch event, surrounded by our growing team and industry partners, I reflected on everything that had happened. The journey had been painful and challenging beyond anything I could have imagined that day in HR when they fired me for betrayal. But the outcome had exceeded my wildest hopes. Not only had I reclaimed my invention and established my rightful place as its creator, but I had built something more meaningful, a company that embodied the values I believed in, that would protect other inventors from experiencing what I had endured. Sometimes the greatest innovations aren't the products we create, but the systems we build to ensure fairness and recognition for all creators. Standing up for yourself isn't just a personal victory, it can transform an entire industry and protect countless others who might otherwise suffer in silence. If you've ever had your ideas stolen or your contributions minimized, know that you're not alone. Fighting back isn't easy, but the alternative is a world where injustice becomes accepted practice. Document everything, find allies who believe in you, and never underestimate the power of determination and truth. Have you ever had your work or ideas taken without credit? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life experiences that might help you navigate your own challenges. And don't forget to share with anyone who might be facing similar situations. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your work has value. Your contributions matter. And you deserve recognition for what you create.